is recording now, so that's good.
We've kicked this around before. We both draw on Shakespeare in our work, and here we all get to watch you literally draw about Shakespeare.
So I guess we dive in.
We dive in.
We dive in.
Well, I can kick it off by saying, Gary, thank you for inviting me to join you on this adventure.
It is an adventure, isn't it? Yeah. I just said, wouldn't it be fun to just sort of chat about Shakespeare and I could draw while we chat? And you went, that's a great idea. So here we are. Welcome everybody.
Yes, welcome to the literally dozen of you maybe watching this. That looks fantastic as I do this, but there's no way I could possibly hold this. Shoot, it was working so well until it wasn't.
So you may have noticed that Austin's background suddenly magically changed. We had a small technical issue there, so we're gonna press on, but there may be the odd moment where things will go blah, but we will cut those out, so everything will run smoothly.
There we are. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Oh, fantastic.
I don't know where I was in my point, but I was saying that I am so jealous of anybody who has any sort of visual skill at all, because I'm jealous of Mia Gosling, aka Good Tickle Brain, who does nothing but stick figures, and you do something exquisitely more than that. You want to start talking? Well, can you talk and draw? Can you talk about?
I can talk and draw because I use my hand for one and my mouth for the other, so we're okay. The brain gets shared between the two, so sometimes what comes out of my mouth is complete bollocks, but it's still probably worth a go.
Well, we were going to talk about Twelfth Night today as the first play we talk about. Can you talk about when you first discovered Shakespeare and why you were drawn to him?
Like all kids, I was taught Shakespeare at school, and I did Antony and Cleopatra and Macbeth and Twelfth Night actually at school, and I was indifferent towards it. And then in my mid-20s, I mean, I came to it fairly late, but in my mid-20s, I was a huge fan of Jonathan Pryce, the actor Jonathan Pryce, and I saw he was going to be playing Macbeth at the RSC with Sinead Cusack as Lady Macbeth and Hugh Quarshie, who'd been in Highlander as Banquo, and I thought, well, that sounds like a good cast. I'm going to go and see that. So I sat down and the lights went out and the play started and my chin hit my knees. And I don't think I closed my mouth for 2 hours. I went straight out to the box office and booked tickets to see it again. And from that moment, I think I pretty much saw everything that the Royal Shakespeare Company did for the next sort of 15 years, because it just blew me away, the difference between the two things. And it was like a road to Damascus conversion.
I think that's awesome, because you finally came to Shakespeare. You finally experienced him in his natural habitat, which is the theater. I think, with respect to any teacher who's ever had to teach Shakespeare, teaching him in an English class diminishes him in ways that I think are not fair to Shakespeare, when he becomes just a vehicle to learn about literature and learn about literary expression.
Yeah.
He's really telling stories and creating characters and
writing for actors to perform.
Right, writing for actors to perform. I still struggle with reading Shakespeare. I have a lot of experience reading him, but I still struggle with it. And I have to read it out loud to understand it, because it frequently, almost always, makes more sense coming out of my face.
Totally. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. Yeah, you sit there looking at a line and going, I just don't know what this means. And as soon as you say it out loud, the music of the line sings.
Yeah.
And you suddenly, you find you have to breathe in certain places, and suddenly you go, oh, okay, I get it.
Well, and I had the reverse experience to you, is that I grew up going to American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. Well, I first encountered him live on stage at American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. Really, I discovered Shakespeare through Star Trek.
Ah, fantastic.
Because he's quoted in Star Trek. They've stolen plot lines from him.
Referenced constantly, yeah.
He's referenced constantly. I knew him as a presence in popular culture before I saw him on stage. But then I saw him on stage, and then when I would read it on the page, I would go, well, I know this must make sense because I saw it make sense.
Yeah.
And And now, who is this that you've drawn for us?
That was the sort of vague look that Jonathan Pryce had in the production I went to see. They had these sort of tartan sashes and shields, and it was kind of non-specific historic, which I really liked.
I love that period. It's my favorite period.
Oh, it's my favorite period, and is something that I often find myself going to when I'm working on productions or doing, directing them or whatever.
I tend to love the productions I'm realizing that aren't set in any specific period.
Yeah.
Because they pull what is useful, and this is what I love about theater generally.
Yeah.
It's pretend. It's make-believe. We are not that removed from pulling kitchen utensils and using them as helmets.
So Twelfth Night. So what's the first Twelfth Night you remember seeing?
But the first production I saw was the Trevor Nunn film version, and I liked a lot of it. Specifically, the fact that they stage the shipwreck at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
So you see the bond between Viola and her brother Sebastian. you see them playing dress up. You see them both playing dress up. So you begin to understand why she would think dressing up is a good idea. But the thing I didn't care for in that film is the Malvolio's punishment seemed to exceed the crime.
Yeah.
And part of that is
Nigel Hawthorne was Malvolio in that, yeah.
Nigel Hawthorne was Malvolio, and so good and so compelling and so sympathetic that as an audience, my sympathies were skewed over to him in favor of the clowns. And I think I not only do I think it, I believe it. I think we're supposed to root for Toby and Andrew and Mariah there, not Malvolio. Do you think it's important that we recount the plot of Twelfth Night for any?
We could do, couldn't we, for the uninitiated. Yeah. Well, let's sort of tag team the plot a bit then.
So Viola is shipwrecked, and it believes her brother Sebastian to have died in the shipwreck or drowned, and she has landed in Illyria, where she is forced to improvise and make her way in this new land. It was run by a man named Orsino, a name she recognizes as being somebody that her father knows.
Yeah, she was in love with Olivia,
right?
As sort of the next door court, as it were. Yeah. She's in mourning for a dead father and a dead brother, and hasn't the slightest interest in him.
Not at all. Not at all. And Mariah is, Olivia, she's lost two men that she loves, and she's surrounded by men that she doesn't really care for. Like a drunk uncle that's more of a burden than anything else, Sir Toby Belch, the greatly named Sir Toby Belch.
Yes,
Malvolio, who in the original script is a Puritan sort of butler.
Yeah, sort of major domo, kind of head of the household, kind of.
Yeah. And Sir Andrew
Aguecheek, who's there?
Andrew Aguecheek, who is a kind of a hanger-on.
Who is also kind of in love with Olivia as well.
Yes. Well, and in some productions, Feste. She has a clown named Feste who is in love with her as well, depending on the production. She's surrounded by these men who are not very appealing, and suddenly Orsino sends Viola dressed as
Cesario
to woo on his behalf the Lady Olivia. And there is Viola there.
That was for the Trevor Nunn one. That was the sort of costume. They went for this sort of militaristic, and they had this little bit at the beginning of the film, I remember, when they were showing them dressing up, where they were putting on theatricals, and she stuck on a little moustache to look like her brother. So she does that in the film. She sticks on a little tash so that she looks kind of like that. Yeah, I remember.
And in the production, I just recently directed a production, well, maybe coming up on 2 years now, at Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, and and we set it in 1850s San Francisco, and our conceit was that Viola, when she was rescued, was given a sailor's uniform to wear, a spare sailor's uniform to wear, and Sebastian was also rescued and was given the identical sailor's uniform.
Excellent. I did a stage version, which we then filmed a little after, about 20 years ago, and we set it because Illyria is basically like the Yugoslavian coastline sort of thing. So we set it in the aftermath of the Civil War, like in Yugoslavia. So everyone was wearing combats,
Oh, right.
So they're very de-sexing. So Viola was wearing these big boots and combat jackets and stuff with the short hair and everything, and that
Well,
that kind of worked really well.
and I think that context helps. That sort of historical context, or really any context, helps ground the comedy for me, and also gives Viola a reason to dress up, a
Yeah.
reason to impersonate a man, because there is a risk to her if she doesn't. It's not just, she doesn't do it because, hey, this will be funny. No, she's doing it for a reason.
Yeah.
I love that look. Who's this now?
Well, this is a little bit like, it's a sort of I'm doing a bit of a mashup here of Elizabethan and Jacobean, but there was one of the productions it's a very square production, if you like, but there was visual elements of it I like, which was the BBC Shakespeare one years and years and years ago, when Felicity Kendall played Viola, and they set it in sort of early Jacobean. And of course, what was great about that period was the clothes were this kind of the men's clothes were quite effeminate and very flamboyant, and they had big hair, and the jackets were quite puffy and disguised the shapes, and they had these big puffling pants, to quote a sort of upstart crow, and that hid hips and things like that. So there was an effeminacy to the boys, to the young men, that worked really well. So at the time of writing, it would have been very easy for the disguise as a boy isn't as far-fetched as sometimes it can be in more modernized productions, I find.
It's what I think. I think that's what makes Twelfth Night so wonderful, is that it's got such great comedy, but it's character comedy rather than situational, and rather than punchline driven. And for me, and I figured this out when I had to direct it, I had to really think about it. For me, Twelfth Night is the Hamlet of the comedies.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. I know exactly what you mean. It's got depth and heart and soul. It's not just fluff. There's a lot going on in there.
And it's about grief. I mean, just at the bare bones, it opens with death. It opens with the loss of a father, and a brother, and beloved figures. And they were written, we think they were written very close to one another, right around 1599, 1600. And according to the recent Norton editions, Hamlet was written first, or produced first, and then Twelfth Night was produced right after it. So they do seem to be like the tragedy and the comedy sides of the grief coin, if you will.
And it's almost about, it's like the how love, the power of love overcoming the sort of the pain of the grief, which is rather beautiful,
and of sharing the grief. I realized that Hamlet's grief is mocked and made fun of and dismissed, and Viola's grief and Olivia's grief is shared. And I feel like that's part of the reason why Viola finds Viola in disguise as Cesario so appealing and attractive. Not only is he a different type of man than every other man around her, but I think they both sense this loss. They are sisters in grief. I've seen productions of Twelfth Night that I like quite a lot, but that characterize Olivia as this bored socialite, or this not a party girl so much, but just as this a rich woman without a care in the world. And that to me, that absolutely undercuts the comedy, which is the most important thing, but also the real attachment you have to these characters. You want Olivia's life to be made better by loving Viola as Cesario, and you want Cesario to be happy too, but they can't be happy together. So you're rooting for them, and I think it's because you sympathize with their pain that you root for them, not because, how's this rich woman going to busy her day.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And also, I've often seen ones where I've found, they've done Olivia, who's, I think, is too old. I think Olivia reads young.
Yes.
I think she's a young woman who hasn't, she's unmarried at that point in time. So, usually you would be quite young still at that point. She's lost the father and the brother. She's lost the dominating male figures in her life at that point in a society where the male figures will dominate. So she's got to be quite young and lost. And this is why I think Malvolio feels he has such power in the household, because he's suddenly the dominant male.
That's beautiful what you've done there. That's lovely. Look at that.
So, yeah, and again, it's sort of non-specific sort of period costume. There was a lovely, one of the versions of Twelfth Night that I really enjoyed a few years back was the Kenneth Branagh directed one. I saw Caroline Langrish, I think, played Olivia, and Frances Barber was Viola, Anton Lesser was Feste, Richard Briers was Malvolio. It was a really interesting. It was all set at winter, and it was black and white and very little colour. And she was a really sad Olivia who then gets drawn out of her shell by this young man that she thinks she's falling in love. It was a very, very beautiful production. Quite a melancholy. I mean, it was funny. Right. And I know we've spoken about this before, and I've heard you talk about it before, that we do like our comedies to be funny. I think some people can overemphasize the melancholy in the plays. And I think if you play it as written, it's there. You don't need to overdo it. So it was quite a melancholy one, but it worked. There was just something about it that worked.
I had this conversation with Peter Holland. I don't know whether you know Peter, but he's eminent Shakespearean, currently teaches at Notre Dame University, and is the head of the International Shakespeare Association. And we were having lunch. Peter was saying, well, remember, the last line of the play is the rain, it reigneth every day. And I said, yes, but the second to last line is we strive to please you every day. And that's what I want to do, because that's the reason we're here. And then he went, yes, but the last line is the rain, But I agree with you. It's there, but if you emphasize that, you're emphasizing the wrong thing. And part of that, we can blame Hemmings and Condell, right?
Oh, yeah.
John Hemmings and Henry Condell for listing Twelfth Night as a comedy in the first folio. And theaters don't advertise it as Shakespeare's sparkling melancholy. You know, you have to deliver on audience expectation, and then people can be surprised. I think that melancholy strain is helpful to ground the play.
But also, if you don't have the melancholy, it's just out and out fast, and it's fun. And I think, you know, the humour and the melancholy, they feed off each other, don't they? And I love it when comedies can have some sadness, and when the sad plays have comedy. I've seen some very funny Hamlets.
Yes.
And Lears. I've seen, you know, and I love that.
To wildly overgeneralize, I would say that too many productions of Shakespearean comedies are insufficiently serious, and too many productions of Shakespeare's tragedies and histories are insufficiently comic. Because this is the thing that I draw on from Shakespeare, was his mixture of tones.
Yeah.
He didn't think that that things were all one thing. There's horrible gross comedy in Titus Andronicus.
Yes.
It's horrible. You're laughing for all the wrong reasons, but it's there, and that speaks to something fundamental in us. You know, laughter is a release of tension, and there needs to be tension. And there needs to be
laughter and tears is such a potent combination in life. And you know, and it's something I treasure. Laughter in sadness is something that's very important, you know, to me in life, certainly. And I think that's what Shakespeare taps into. He sees that. He understands the human condition. I know it's a cliche, but he does. I hope
you're going to draw Malvolio at some point, because you have played Malvolio, yes?
I have indeed. I played Malvolio in 2017. I played Feste twice, which is kind of what I'm drawing here, a sort of one of those sort of slightly melancholy, baggy Festes. Yes, I played Malvolio in 2017 in an open air production, which was really good fun to do. We played it sort of Jacobean, and it's a very special production for me. My wife Joy played Maria in that, and she was hilarious. She died shortly after we did the show, so it was the last play we ever did together. We did loads of Shakespeare together. This came up in the podcast I did with you. So, you know, it's kind of fitting in a weird way that the last one we ever did together was a Shakespeare. But I mean, you know, that aside, what a cracking part.
It so is. And we've talked about this too, the recent NT Live production with Tamsin Gregg as Malvolia. I
Yeah.
really liked her performance. I didn't like the production's emphasis on Malvolia's pain. I think that
It was
turns out,
very painful, wasn't it? And I think,
yeah,
yeah, that was quite extreme. But her take on the comedy was excellent, I thought.
yeah, I really liked it a lot.
She was, she found that haughtiness that underneath that weird giddiness, and she falls in love. There's this release, and you can see that inside this pent up person, there's so much passion struggling to get out, which I guess is that Puritan thing of suppressing feelings. And I thought she played that excellently.
Well, and I don't know how he was received over there, but I loved Stephen Fry as Malvolio in the Mark Rylance.
He was curiously understated, wasn't he? It's interesting. I loved that production, and I thought he was great because he just played it completely straight. He played it like the text.
Well, and Stephen Fry is an actor who doesn't need to act haughty.
The Mariah in that almost stole the show for me. I thought he was extraordinary.
Absolutely.
Just an incredible. He got the playfulness of the character and the sort of the anger at Malvolio and the way and there's the bit at the end when they say, it was Mariah's idea, and it recompensed her with, so Toby has married her, and he went, yay! It was just this lovely moment, which was just I literally laughed out loud watching it. I thought it was a very, very good production, that one, and a curiously comic Olivia from Mark Rylance, who played a sort of quite giggling, girly version, which took me by surprise a few times.
Well, and yet it's supported by the text, because Olivia complains to herself about how this boy made her stutter. And he made that literal and played with the verse in a way that I love. I am no slave to any sort of sense of how the verse must be done.
No, I think the verse is big enough to look after itself.
Yeah, very good.
And I totally agree with that. You play with the verse to make it sound natural.
Yeah.
And by that, I don't mean, falsely. I always say, look, don't worry about the poetry. Breathe on the commas and breathe longer on the full stops. If you need to grab one, grab it at the end of a line, and it will look after itself and it will make sense.
Absolutely.
This was basically my Malvolio. This was the look we went for. Oh, we've frozen again, haven't we?
No, I'm just watching. I'm sitting here sort of mouth open because I'm enjoying your work so much.
Oh.
But yes, I thought you had frozen a bit because now you're drawing his foot, and I can see that. For the longest time, you were on his arm.
Right. There must have been a slight freeze there, yeah.
Well, right, and you're getting to the fundamental part about, his legs and the cross-gartering.
Absolutely, the yellow stockings and the cross-gartering, which we basically did like that.
Malvolio coming in with these yellow cross-gartered stockings is such a great visual gag.
And it's a great theatrical moment. I mean, it really is, because he flags it up.
Yep.
He's coming, he's got all the, and so it's such a build-up. So when you're playing that moment, I tell you, there's such a pressure on you to get it funny.
Right. Well, and I told my actress, I encouraged her to even more build up the entrance, because she said something literally like, if you want to see something that's going to make your eyes pop out, I'm paraphrasing, come and watch this. But also, now you're frozen, am I?
Yes, with a fantastic one, actually. It's very Wallace and Gromit what I've got you on at the moment.
And the other thing I love, the other great moment of great comedy in Twelfth Night is the reluctant fight scene between Viola and Aguecheek.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's two people trying to act incredibly heroic and tough and manly, and each one completely unable to, for different reasons.
Different reasons.
Yeah, and it's great. It's such a and again, it's character comedy, because these characters have been set up for 2 hours now, almost 90 minutes in the right production. So when they finally come to blows in inverted commas and air quotes, it's ridiculous, because of course they can't.
the double payoff on that is that when just like a scene later, they think they've come across him, Cesario, again, but now it's Sebastian. And
Right.
Sebastian goes, have that. And Sebastian goes, no, you, and lamps him. Oh.
What do you think? Should I try to go downstairs closer to the router?
I think I've realized, as I was just saying in our technical break, that I was recording this at my end, not on gallery view. So quite possibly there was lots of tiny windows of me in the corner and lots of picture of Austin huge on the screen. So
going, Lou, look at the drawings.
So we'll see. I mean, this could be a disaster. But anyway.
But I know that you have the capabilities of editing, because I've seen both Lockdowns 1 and 2.
So anyway, this was that was my Malvolio. That was how we did it in the production that I was in. I shaved my head, went for that very Puritan, shaved head thing. And,
I love it.
And our box tree up there.
I love it.
Which has one of the most brilliant rude Shakespeare jokes ever when he's reading the letter.
Is this the see you next Tuesday joke?
It is. Her sees her using her T's and thus she makes her great P's. I mean, what a fantastically rude joke, and it's lovely. I love the fact that it's in there and we study it at school. Well,
and there's several great jokes at 12th Night. One is in that letter. The letter says, once you see this, revolve.
Ah, revolve.
You've got to revolve. And I love that there's some line readings, and I don't know whether they originated with Mark Rylance, but when Olivia asks, "What is your parentage?" It's a script as a repetition. It's like, I'm such an idiot for asking that stupid question. And I did love Rylance's line reading of "What ho, Malvolio." Oh,
yes. That's just brilliant, and I love it. I love it when people do that with Shakespeare. I love it. Branagh did it in the Much Ado. There's the line about when Benedict says, "It as written, love me. Why? It must be requited." And he went, "Love me. Why?
Yeah,
must be requited." And you go, "Yeah, that makes."
Love it. I love playing with the language like that. My Viola kept throwing in a lot of kind of Valley Girl. What?
Yeah.
Which was absolutely right on and textually supported.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think Shakespeare obviously went on holiday to California and decided to write her that way. Exactly.
And people don't talk about this enough.
I think that's true. Shakespeare's Californian period.
It's an entire half-hour episode of our 6-part BBC World Service radio show. Shakespeare's little-known trip to America.
I think I remember it well. I think I've got that on audio cassette, that series.
Cassette? That takes me back.
Yes, I know.
And who is this now?
Let's see if you can tell from the vague piece of fair pencil that you're seeing.
This is, let me ask you this. How did you start drawing? Was it, you are now an animator. How did it begin with Shakespeare? Because that would be so perfect if it did.
Wouldn't it just be wonderful? No, basically, my dad wasn't an artist. He was a stockbroker. He could copy stuff, but he always told me that they noticed when they gave me a pen or a pencil when I was a little baby, I didn't hold it like that. I held it like that from the day they first gave me one. And I started drawing, and they were shapes and recognizable things. And I could draw before I could write, really. And apparently it was just kind of there. So I've never not known to be able to. I think it's just a thing. I'm wired a certain way that my brain to hand works.
Well, and you have to, am I right that you have to see it in your head before you can put it on?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, some people say they think in words. I think in pictures. It's a very visual. I run a movie of it in my head the whole time. So if I need to do a drawing, I just run the tape, find the image, if you like, freeze frame it, and then copy what I'm seeing in my head. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it.
Well, and we were just talking about this morning, my wife and I, about, there are times, I like to, when I'm writing something, I like to get it into my head first. So when I'm writing, it's just sort of typing.
Yeah.
But there are times when I don't know what it is, and I need to sit down and start typing to see what it is I'm writing.
On the rare occasions I write, which I do occasionally, I love it, that moment, and I'm sure you get this, when you're starting to write and the writing takes over, and you go, oh, I didn't know I was going to write that. I love that moment.
And it also points to a thing too, is that when you're writing something or drawing something or creating a play or creating a production, the minute you put down a word or draw a sketch or start to stage a scene, this is a new thing. This is a thing that then tells you what it wants to be. And you have created something that now has its own life and has its own impulse and has its own needs. And whatever you thought you were starting to create is now something else that deserves to be created in the way it wants to be created, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. I get, it's that great thing of when the creation takes over and lets you know what it wants to be, and the creation almost becomes the creator. It's telling you, and I think that's brilliant. And being able to respond to that, I think, is a difference between, I think someone who's good at what they do and someone who forces their own opinion on a thing.
Right. Yes. Well, and particularly it must be fun for you to go back and forth, as it is for any writer, I suppose, who's also in the theater. The theater is such a collaborative medium, and it only exists because so many people work on it at the same time and work to create this thing.
And sort of play and to play our tiny little violins at the moment. One of the hardest things in this whole lockdown thing for people like ourselves, whose everything is about collaboration, is that not being able to do that has been quite tricky, which is why it's so cool that we can do stuff like this to get the creative juice out and share a bit of creativity and stuff that you'd normally be doing in a big team. It's lovely to be able to do this. Well,
and I wish you and I could do this while I'm writing a scene, but there's no way I could do that.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing though?
But it's amazing because it's amazing to watch you do this. Now this, because in the faint pencil sketch, I could see the sidebars of this hat, and I went, well, he's drawing the Easter Bunny, obviously. Obviously, but no, you're drawing Feste the Fool. But yet you knew from the jump what you were starting on about.
I knew that I was going to do a traditional sort of jester type Feste with the silly hat and the little puppet and his drum. But details take me by surprise. Like, as I was drawing him, I thought, it's raining. Oh, his tights are going to get baggy. I mean, I hadn't planned the baggy tights till I started drawing them. And
right.
It just sort of happens. The overall shape was in my head,
and this is, we could probably do an entire episode of Drawing on Shakespeare just talking about Shakespeare's fools, because Feste is one of his wise fools that is wiser and funnier who is wiser and more melancholy than he is actually funny.
Yeah, although he has got a couple of good gags.
He does, but then for some reason the best line in the script is given to a character that only shows up in Act 4, Fabian, who says, if this were played on a stage now,
condemn it as an improbable fiction.
Which is a
I
great
have seen
line.
Productions where they've actually kept that as Feste.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Which is an interesting way of doing it. Because earlier on, Mariah says, the fool shall make a third, where she says, you two hide and the fool make a third, and then he doesn't. And you go, did Shakespeare forget? Or what happened? Why did suddenly this new character turn up, even though it had been flagged up that Feste was going to be there? And it's one of those great mysteries, isn't it? I'm sure there's lots of theories. I have no idea.
I wonder if what Shakespeare forgot was that he had an actor who needed work. And like,
you do wonder. And maybe the guy playing Feste just needed a day off. Yeah, let me think. What else can I draw? Oh, yeah, I was actually thinking I need to do a Toby and Andrew, really, don't I?
Yeah, you do. You absolutely do.
So Roger Allen played Toby Belch years ago. That was an interesting one. He was only in his 30s at the time or something. Very sexy Toby Belch. He was really it's like a sort of, rugby playing yob.
I saw Roger Allen's Falstaff at the Globe. with where he felt more like Hal's older brother, wayward older brother, than a father figure.
He was extraordinary, wasn't he? I thought he was fantastic, Falstaff. I thought he was an amazing Falstaff in action.
Well, and they are such close cousins, Sir John Falstaff and Sir Toby Belch.
Oh, definitely.
I do love this idea that Shakespeare had his own awareness of his own his own SCU, his Shakespeare Cinematic Universe.
Absolutely.
And how the characters came and went, and so Sir Toby is absolutely a spiritual, if not a biological, cousin to Sir John Falstaff.
Definitely, and almost certainly would have been played by the same guy, probably, or Absolutely. I think that's the thing, isn't it, with Shakespeare as well, that a lot of people, almost fail to think about. I mean, well, those of us who study it or whatever know, but he had a group of actors he was writing for, so he had to write them the right parts, and he knew who he'd got. Oh, so and so can do that sort of comedy. So and so can play that kind of romantic. I'll give them that. I've got this really good boy at the moment. Okay, I'll write Cleopatra. I'll write Lady Macbeth because I've got this boy who's just amazing.
Yeah, I think that's right on. I had the privilege of interviewing Sir Stanley Wells for my podcast, our greatest living Shakespearean and arguably one of the greatest ever Shakespeare scholars and teachers. Yeah. And he told me, he observed in our conversation that Richard Burbage, probably the biggest star celebrity actor of Shakespeare's day, was the leading actor in Shakespeare's company and created the roles of Romeo, Macbeth, Hamlet, Benedict, Lear, probably Orsino, and that the roles aged along with Burbage. And this is getting back to your point, is that Shakespeare was writing for his actors where they were. He wasn't writing an old man for a young Burbage to play or a young man for an old Burbage to play. Yeah. Burbage's roles were age appropriate to who Burbage was. And apparently he wasn't a singer because he never sings except when he's Benedict, when he makes fun of how bad a singer he is.
How bad a singer he is. I love it. Yeah.
Well, and it also, that would explain, getting back to Twelfth Night, that would explain why Orsino feels a little underwritten. It's not really his story, except his 1/3 of at least two of the romantic triangles in the play. And I think it's because Shakespeare went, I've got so many things to do. He's just played Hamlet, Richard Burbage. He's just played. Orsino wants to be sexy and attractive. Oh, hell, I'll just have Richard Burbage play him, and everybody will get that.
And you'll get that for free. Yeah. I think you're right. And often, I don't know about you, but in productions that I've seen, it's often one of the more disappointing roles and performances that you'll see. I mean, although going back to the national production, I thought Oliver Chris was brilliant.
Can that guy ever set a wrong foot forward?
I've not seen him do it yet.
Nor have I. Well, and I think that speaks to casting as well. It speaks to the problems of casting, is that depending on who your star is, the lead of your production of Twelfth Night could be Olivia, it could be Malvolio or Malvolia, it could be Viola, maybe it should be Viola, and it's rarely Orsino, but it could be if your biggest star was playing Orsino and you're getting all of his wattage and magnetism for free. It really does skew the production depending on who's in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the great things about Shakespeare and why we can keep coming back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm loving these Sir Toby and Sir Andrew as they take shape under your pencil there. I mean, that Sir Toby needs a few egg stains on his basket.
I decided I'd done enough sort of Jacobean and stuff. I thought, let's bring it up to sort of the 20s. Let's get a bit Woodhouse with it,
I love it.
The 20s is another period that works really well for Shakespeare comedies.
Look at those guys. I love that.
Toby and Andrew. I quite like the idea of I can feel a 20s version coming on now. It's like, if I do it again, maybe I should do it in the 20s.
I love it. What should we draw? What sort of Shakespeare should we draw on next, Gary?
Well, You mentioned Much Ado. We could always tackle that, or we could. I mean, we're heading into the summer. There's always Midsummer Night's Dream, which obviously has a wealth of visual imagery we can play with. I think we should stick with the comedies for a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll hit the tragedies later.
Well, but as we have pointed out in the complete works of Shakespeare, the tragedies are much funnier than the comedies. So
yeah.
Yeah, but I agree. Let's stick with the comedies.
Yeah. I think we're looking at A Much Ado or a Dream next, aren't we? Probably.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for watching, One Guy.